All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. There's nobody that will question that the Minnesota Timberwolves are one of the most talented teams in the NBA, but that talent alone has not resulted in a deep playoff run. Now, three out of the last six seasons have seen Minnesota qualify for the NBA playoffs, but they failed to get past the first round. And for what it's worth, the Timberwolves have only made it past the first round once in franchise history. However, things have been different so far this year for the Timberwolves, as they currently are tied with the Boston Celtics for the best record in the National Basketball Association at 21-6. So far, Minnesota has enjoyed wins over the Denver Nuggets, New York Knicks, Philadelphia 76ers, and Boston Celtics, just to name a few. Now, plain and simple, make no mistake about it. This is now Anthony Edwards' team, as he is leading the Timberwolves in scoring at nearly 25 per contest. But for all that we can talk about Anthony Edwards and all that we could talk about Carl Anthony Towns and others, the biggest improvement for Minnesota this season has been in their defense, as they are now allowing the fewest points in the NBA per contest. This is year number three for Chris Finch as the Timberwolves head coach, and it's all about trying to change that culture in Minneapolis around this team. And I say this because the Timberwolves have been accustomed to losing. And when you peel back the surface and talk about the losing that the Timberwolves have had, they have one of the lowest winning percentages in NBA history. And again, like I said, this is a team that, they've been plagued by, losing throughout their existence for the most part. And honestly, for what it's worth, they do have the lowest win percentage in NBA history. It's one of those where you got to go back to 2004 to find the last time that the Minnesota Timberwolves were able to get out of the first round of the playoffs. And of course, the only time that year they got to the Western Conference Finals and they lost to the Los Angeles Lakers. But, it's a team that they've just been plagued by bad personnel decisions over the years. However, right now you got a new ownership group in there. You've got a new head coach. And like I said, trying to change that culture. When you have a team, an organization that's accustomed to losing for so long, it's very difficult to get things turned around. But the Timberwolves are, as a whole, trending upwards in that aspect. And like I said, you still got Carl Anthony Towns, one of the better big men, excuse me, in the NBA. For me, it's just one of those where Carl Anthony Towns is good, but he has the potential to be even better, but he's never really reached that potential. And then, of course, you got Rudy Gobert, who was brought in to be a rim protector. And of course, it didn't work out last year for Minnesota as they were bumped in the first round of the playoffs. But I think one good thing for this team, you got a veteran point guard in Mike Conley Jr. And I say point guard in the truest sense of the term because not a lot of teams around the NBA have a traditional point guard anymore. It's all about this positionless basketball, and you need that floor general. You need that guy who's going to take control. But more importantly, Mike Conley Jr. is a veteran, and he can provide some leadership on this squad. And then getting back to Anthony Edwards, of course, a couple of years ago, Minnesota made him the first overall pick. And Anthony Edwards, for me, has the it factor. And the reason why I say it is this young man comes to play night in and night out. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. And you could see he's one of those guys that, in my opinion, hates to lose more than he enjoys to win. And you need guys like that at the forefront of your organization if you're going to win. So, of course, one of the big questions is, will Minnesota be able to keep it up? And we've got to wait and see because we've seen this group start off strong before and, dip, in the standings. And it's tough right now. And it's going to be tough this year The reason why I say it is because you've got a very good Western Conference. You've got an improving OKC squad. You still got the defending NBA champions and the Nuggets. You got the Clippers. You've got the Lakers, who should get it going at some point. The Dallas Mavericks, the Phoenix Suns. What's going to become of the Memphis Grizzlies now that Ja Morant is back? So, it's one of those situations where you got to keep up with the Joneses and you got to bring it on a night in and night out basis in the West if you're going to stay in that top tier of teams. So that's going to be important for Minnesota because will they be able to do that? We've got to wait and see. But when it's all said and done, the Timberwolves have the tools in the toolbox to go out there and make a deep playoff run. But it's just going to be interesting to see if this team is going to be able to answer that bell. You go back to last year's playoff loss when they lost in 5 games to the Denver Nuggets. You could have made a case where the Timberwolves could have been swept in that series. And don't get me wrong, the Nuggets had the better team, but Denver out executed Minnesota in that series. And I hopefully for Minnesota's sake, they learned from that experience and they're looking to build off of that. So this is a very strong start for the Minnesota Timberwolves, about a third of the way through this NBA season. It's going to be interesting to see if they can keep it up. But nonetheless, if Minnesota can keep this up and if Minnesota can live up to their expectations, I think this could be one of the top teams in the Western Conference this year. Of course, that big time trade last year to bring in a guy like Rudy Gobert. Clearly, you didn't bring in Gobert for his offensive prowess. You brought him in at the defensive end. And, he's got to be a guy. He's got to protect the rim. He's got to get those rebounds for you and play off of another big like Karl Anthony Towns. And then at the end of the day, a guy like Anthony Edwards. It doesn't take much for him to go off and get a 40-point contest. That's the type of guy he is. He's got that dog factor. He's got that it factor. But nonetheless, about a third of the way through this NBA season, strong start for the T-Wolves. Let's see if they can keep it up and remain among the best teams in the West. So, folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.